Yeah, I wish there was something else I could have done legally, but I went through everything I could, everything that my lawyers could do, everything, I just never thought that someone would go and do this. You talk about the feeling of how do you prepare for this, you get down to almost the finish line, just to have someone cut your legs out from underneath you. And the only thing left to do is crawl across the finish line to bring the remains home.
Where 6 people were found dead inside an apartment on Harris Avenue.
Including children, an utter tragedy here. Mechanicville police say officers were asked to do a welfare check yesterday evening at the John Moore apartment complex. And when they got there, they found a horrific scene. 2 adults and 4 children found dead, ranging in age from 10 to 13 years old, inside one apartment.
6 people, one family, found dead inside a small apartment in Mechanicville, New York. 4 of them were kids. The youngest were only 10 years old. And right now, police believe the person responsible for killing most of them was their own grandmother. Before we get into this one, if you're new here, hit subscribe and tap that bell icon. This channel is Crime Files, and if you don't, you're going to miss the next case. And trust me, you don't want to miss these. Okay, let's get into it. It started with a welfare check. A neighbor hadn't seen 64-year-old Amy Steadman in about 2 weeks. That's not normal for her. So the neighbor called it in. Police showed up at her apartment on Harris Avenue, part of a public housing complex called the John S. Moore Homes. Building management let them in. And what officers found inside was something this whole community is still trying to process. 6 bodies. Amy Steadman herself, her daughter, 44-year-old Sarah Myers, and Sarah's 4 children, Harper, 13, Hudson, 11, and 10-year-old twins, Gavin and Gracelyn. Here's the detail that makes this even harder to sit with. Sarah and her kids didn't even live in that apartment. They had their own unit, just a short walk away, in the same complex. So at some point, this mother and her 4 children left their own home and ended up dead inside Grandma's apartment instead. The bodies had already been there a while. Police said it looked like an extended period of time had passed, and because of the condition the bodies were in, officers couldn't even identify who they were looking at right away. They had to wait for autopsies just confirm names. Now, let's talk about who Sarah Myers actually was, because before any of this, she was just a mom trying to hold her family together. Friends and family describe her as a wonderful mother, someone who was fiercely protective of her 4 kids. She'd survived domestic violence in her past, and she'd actually talked online about wanting to start a nonprofit to help kids who'd lived through abuse or crisis, kind of like turn her own pain into something that could help others. At the time she died, Sarah was in the middle of a brutal, years-long custody battle with her ex-husband, Brady Harmon, who lived out in Utah. And that custody fight, it's about to become a huge part of this story. Neighbors said the family mostly kept to themselves. Quiet, low-key, nothing that screamed warning sign. One neighbor who was close with Amy Steadman said there was a really tight mother-daughter bond between her and Sarah. No red flags. No indication that anything like this was coming. But something clearly was. Let's rewind a bit, because to really understand this case, you need to understand the relationship between Sarah and Brady. They got married back in December 2015 in Salt Lake City, Utah. 4 years later, in November 2019, they separated. Divorce papers got filed in early 2020. And then nothing happened for 6 years. The divorce didn't actually get finalized until April 2026, just 2 months before this tragedy. The judge granted it on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Under the custody agreement, Sarah got sole physical custody of the kids during the school year. Brady got them for 2 full months every summer, starting that very summer, 2026. He also got scheduled video calls and holidays. Sounds simple on paper. It was not simple in real life. Brady told reporters he hadn't seen his children in person since 2019. Years. His only connection to Harper, Hudson, Gavin, and Gracelyn was through occasional video calls. And then, even those started slipping away. He said the last time he actually spoke to his kids was June 7th. He was expecting another call a few days later, but he says Sarah told him the kids were sick and couldn't come to the phone. Then silence. He couldn't reach her, couldn't reach the children, nothing. So Brady did what any concerned parent would do. He started calling Mechanicville police, asking for welfare checks. June 13th, June 16th, June 17th, June 19th, for separate requests in less than a week. And according to Brady, officers actually went to the apartment each time. They told him they could hear sounds inside, but nobody ever answered the door. Think about that for a second. For welfare checks, sounds coming from inside, and no one opens the door. Officers didn't force entry. Maybe it seemed too soon to escalate. Maybe there wasn't enough for a probable cause. But somewhere behind that door, something was happening, or maybe already over. At the same time, the legal battle in Utah wasn't slowing down. On June 2nd, Brady filed a motion asking the court to formally enforce the custody agreement. He accused Sarah of violating it in multiple ways, failing to hand over medical records, school records, dental and psychological records, giving an inaccurate home address, and interfering with his scheduled calls with the kids. And here's the timing that makes this whole thing feel like a ticking clock. Sarah was actually served with additional court paperwork on June 12th. She was ordered to appear in Utah court on June 29th to answer for allegedly not following the custody terms. That hearing never happened because by June 23rd, she was already dead, and the kids, who were scheduled to fly out to Utah on July 1st, just days away, to finally spend real time with their father, never made that flight either. So now you've got a mother facing a court date she probably dreaded. For kids about to leave for 2 months, maybe longer, things kept escalating legally. And somewhere in the middle of all that pressure, all 4 of those kids ended up dead inside their grandmother's apartment, along with their mom and their grandmother. When police finally got inside on June 23rd and pieced together what happened, the picture that formed was disturbing. Autopsies were conducted the very next day, June 24th, at Albany Medical Center. That's when investigators learned that one of the children, they haven't publicly said which one, died from what police called a fatal sharp force injury. In plain terms, that child was stabbed. The other 5, investigators believe, showed signs consistent with poisoning. Police said they recovered numerous prescription and over-the-counter medications inside the apartment. Evidence, they say, points to intentional poisoning, not accidental, intentional. Then came the detail that really shifted the entire investigation. A handwritten note found inside the apartment. Police won't say what it says, won't release it publicly. But Chief William Rabbit stood in front of reporters and said this note, combined with other circumstantial evidence, strongly suggests that Amy Steadman, the grandmother, was involved in the deaths. Let that sink in for a second. Not an intruder, not a stranger. Investigators say there's no evidence anyone from outside this family had anything to do with it. No forced entry. No sign of a struggle with an outsider. Just 6 family members, and a note that seems to point straight at the one adult who survived long enough to write it down, before she also ended up dead. So was this a murder-suicide? That's the theory a lot of people have landed on. Amy, for reasons still unknown, may have harmed her daughter and grandchildren before taking her own life. But police have been very careful, almost cautious, about saying that outright. Officially, they're calling this a criminal investigation. Officially, no charges have been filed because, well, you can't charge someone who's already dead. And officially, the causes and manners of death for all 6 victims are still pending toxicology results and a final medical examiner's review. Why the caution? Because the order of deaths matters. Who died first? Who administered what? Whether Sarah had any awareness of what was happening before it was too late. Those details change everything about how this story gets remembered. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Sarah's own family has come forward, publicly, asking people to stop speculating. They release a statement essentially begging the internet to stop assuming Sarah was somehow behind this. One relative said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Sarah was a wonderful person and an incredible mother, that she was in the middle of a painful custody battle, and that the family has no idea what actually happened inside that apartment. They said the online bashing, people assuming Sarah did this, has been devastating on top of losing 6 family members at once. That tells you something about how fast this case spread online and how quickly people jumped to conclusions with barely any facts confirmed. Outside the apartment, the neighborhood has been left with quiet, painful reminders. Kids' bicycles still parked near the building. A teddy bear placed by the doorway. Neighbors brought balloons and started a small memorial. A vigil was held nearby at Talmadge Park, where community members gathered to grieve a family many of them barely even knew personally, but couldn't stop thinking about. So where does this leave us? A grandmother who police say left behind a note suggesting her own involvement. A daughter who survived domestic violence, dreamed of helping abused kids, and was fighting to protect custody of her own children. For kids who never made it to summer break with their dad. And a community trying to make sense of senseless loss. Was Amy Steadman pushed to a breaking point by watching her daughter suffer through years of legal battles and possibly abuse? Did she believe, in some twisted way, she was protecting these children from something worse? Or was this always building toward tragedy, long before that final court date ever arrived? We may not have all the answers yet. Toxicology results are still pending. The full story behind that handwritten note hasn't been revealed. But cases like this remind us that the quietest families, the ones neighbors describe as having no warning signs at all, can be hiding pain nobody on the outside ever saw. What do you think really happened behind that door? Do you believe Amy acted alone? Do you think Sarah had any idea what was coming? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this case affected you the way it affected me, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, tap that bell icon so you don't miss the next one, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. This is Crime Files, and I'll see you in the next one.